My friends, before I actually offer my second reflection, Mary Kay gave me permission to ask among you anyone who may want to share something that the Lord has put on his or her heart, very briefly from this morning, from your particularly from your conversations. Because a lot of good stuff was going on, but I'm not sure all of it will come to the surface. So anyone courageous enough? Come on, you're courageous. Courageous enough? Want to share anything? Please, just stand up. Thanks to my mother. That's all you had to tell her. She's already God in heaven. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Other thoughts? Anything strike you in your heart about the challenges? Very Catholic group. Okay, we'll have time later on. Later on. Did you? Oh, you did. Please, why don't you stand?
There was something that I wanted to say that's really important and that went off of what you said about we need to remember that it's not us, that God is doing it. And the most important thing that I think is to pray before you go into your activity, and that God will create encounters that you may not even know about, and that we shouldn't worry about that. That it's going to happen whether we know it or not, and that the actual interactions we have will be different from the encounters.
Right. Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely on target, too. Thank you. One other? Anyone else? On the more Catholic side of the... Yes, please.
I'm very struck with the issue about so many who are already in the pews not treasuring the concept of the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And I'm not sure how to evangelize that best for the people who are already in the pews.
That's an excellent question. Next question. No, it is the million-dollar question in many ways. I think that we could have a day just on that question. You could look at the root causes. Perhaps it's poor catechesis. But my heart tells me that there has not yet been in the hearts of those individuals an opportunity to deepen what they once had. It's there, but it's distant, because their encounter with the Lord is distant. And a rejuvenation of the true belief that we have as Catholics in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist is intimately tied, in my estimation, for a rejuvenation of this encounter personally with the Lord. One will aid the other, but that really is a monumental issue we need to deal with. The truth of the matter is, for many young people, it's seen as a symbol, not necessarily as what we believe it to be. The representation in an unbloody way of the one sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Anything else? Please, you'll have the last, and then we could do later on some more.
I have a hope and a cockamamie confidence that perhaps the answer to some of these kinds of dilemmas lies in something you said earlier. Which is, if we as a church engage in the acts of love and don't get our undies in a bunch about drift in people's expressed theological believing, the theology will take care of itself. If we live love, the rest of it's going to take care of itself.
May I add to that? When we celebrate the Eucharist, there are two dimensions at work. There is a horizontal and a vertical dimension. Right? We gather as the community of believers and pray, and the Lord is present, but we are offering right worship to God. Right? We're entering into that great mystery. So I would say this: if a person comes in to church, a church that is loving 7 days of the week, out there, really involved in their lives, in their brokenness. And when we come here, we lift our minds, not simply amongst ourselves, but are pointing to someone greater than who we are, then it will come. The faith in the Eucharist will come. Absolutely. So I agree with you. I agree. Okay, my friends. So, our second topic. You know, I'm Jesuit trained, so I have to summarize what we did this morning. I just have to. Okay? So, following my father's adage to keep it simple and to remember the basics, having pressed the button on the elevator to go to the basement, okay, for those of you who have basements, really what we talked about this morning is an encounter is giving license to someone to rearrange your life and to rearrange the life we share as a community. We said that an encounter with Christ is more than that. It is a loving transformation. And we respond by giving our lives in faith, and He responds by giving us His grace and the power of the Spirit and allowing us to be fed through word, sacrament, and the love we share as a community to go out into that world and touch every broken heart with His healing love. Therefore, we, in these credible communities we form, are the seedbed of the missionary disciples who are the vehicles of His love. But His love is not only to heal broken hearts, but it is to enlighten minds with the truth, and it is to go encourage in the shadows of society, the dark shadows where many of our sisters and brothers dwell, that our society tells us are problems to be solved. And as missionary disciples, we go into the shadows where no one else is willing to go to love brothers and sisters who are not problems, but are equal in dignity and grace. I mentioned this last year. Again, I have to mention it in my own mind, and of course, for my own particular upbringing, you may have a different image. What summarizes a credible community of faith is summarized in one word, and that word is, actually two words, la familia, a family. Families take on many different shapes and sizes in the contemporary world. This we understand. But no matter what family is, the unit that it forms, it's a true, healthy, holy family is marked by all the same characteristics. A loving relationship, acceptance and welcome, challenge born in the truth, a celebration of common identity and history. It's a place where we belong, where we rest, where we are refreshed, and the place from which we go out to continue to give what we received. This is what we form, my friends. It's a family of grace, not of blood. Now, having said all that, this afternoon is all about leadership. Your role and my role in this. If love is a choice, then those of us who are called to leadership in the church need to make choices intentionally, daily, sacrificially, to be able to avoid the major pitfall of Christian life, particularly among leaders. To be in that poor place where you and I try to share He whom we do not know. To try to share He whom we have not encountered, with whom we do not have a relationship. That is the empty gong clanging that St. Paul spoke about. You'll do a lot of good stuff. None of it will last, and none of it will make a difference. Simple as that. So the question here for us this afternoon is, what is our role as leaders? How do we become leaders of communities of encounter? And more practically, as leaders, how can we help our parishes in very practical ways, help to foster what we talked about this morning? My talk is not as long, and therefore I will call upon you at the end for your feedback, right? I'm not doing all the work, in other words, what I'm saying, okay? we're doing this together because we are all leaders here, are we not? Okay. So, there is one man I'd like to turn to who will help us to do this. A very unlikely man. A man we all know very well. We have heard his story over and over again. And this man was introduced to me in this context by one of the most remarkable women I have ever met in my entire life. I met Maria in 1996. Maria was the wife of the janitor of St. Jude Church in Canarsie, Brooklyn. And Maria is a mystic. The very fact that I'm even mentioning her in public, she will kill me. She is a mystic. I've very rarely met a person with such an authentic, profound, and simple faith as she has. And she became in many ways one of my spiritual guides in the years I was at St. Jude's. And we would pray together every day. Anyway, the day I was announced to become the auxiliary bishop of Brooklyn. As you know, when you're nominated, you're under the pontifical secret. You can tell no one. And I called Maria. And Maria, 6:30 in the morning, the day of the announcement. And it said, Maria, I have good news. She said, yes, you're going to become a bishop. And she said, and I knew that for months. And the Lord said, don't tell him. I said, thank you, Lord. All right, so, and then she said something absolutely remarkable. She said to me, Father Frank, she still calls me Father Frank, if you're not willing to become the new Moses, say no. The next day, I had the occasion to speak a bit more about what she meant because I was completely dumbfounded. And she said to me, God's people are in the wilderness. They're searching. And they need leaders to guide them, to give them vision and hope, and to lead them to the promised land. She said, if you are not willing to do that, do not do this ministry. You know what, my friends? It has been 11 years since I've been ordained a bishop. And what I've come to realize is Maria is not only in her own way a mystic, but she is very theologically wise. Because that call is meant for every single person in this church. Every person called to leadership is being called in this age to become another Moses. And if you and I can unpack that just a bit, we will have, I think, some practical and some serious challenges that you and I personally need to reflect on if we're going to build these credible communities of faith, and you and I ourselves be credible witnesses to Christ. Allow me to do it in 3 steps. Number 1, the call of this remarkable man, Moses. We know the story. I need not repeat it. But one thing I find interesting, Moses was very ordinary. In fact, not only was he ordinary, but he was very limited. Remember, Moses was a murderer. He killed the one Egyptian who struck the Israelite. It's not a glowing thing you put on your resume if you want to be a pastoral assistant, okay? By his own admission, he said he could not preach well. He could not speak to Pharaoh. He was not capable, he told Yahweh, to do that. And in the Talmud, it says that Moses, because he did not fully trust God and struck the rock twice at Meribah, he incurred a penalty, which we'll talk about later. So the question is, why, of all the people on earth, did God call Moses, this child drawn out of the water in the basket, to be his leader, to gather his people, to give them vision, to lead them to the promised land. Why was it he took this ordinary man and called him to be extraordinary, this follower, and asked him to become a leader of faith? The answer, my friends, is the first challenge for you and I. And that is, Moses was willing to receive what the Lord was willing to give. He was willing to receive what the Lord was willing to give. And what was the Lord willing to give? It is more than encounter. For Moses had the encounter at the burning bush, did he not? And he did not run away. He was not afraid for his life. He encountered God in a powerful way. In fact, curiosity brought him to the burning bush. But recall with me that it wasn't just a single encounter. But the scripture says Moses communed with God. He would go into the meeting tent and spent, one would call, countless hours in the presence of his Lord, who called him, with whom he had encountered. He spent so much time that he became transparent. His face glowed, and scripture says he had to wear a veil so that he would not distract the people around him, so that they would not confuse him to be the source of that glow. You see, Moses was willing to accept not simply encounter, but enduring relationship. And that, my friends, is the first great challenge. You and I, as leaders of these credible communities of faith, need simply not rest on our laurels to say, yes, I had an encounter with the Lord. Yes, he's alive. But to have a living, lifelong, deepening, burning desire to have a relationship that will transform us. So let me be blunt. The model disciple is Our Lady, the Mother of God, the Mother of the Church. And she is the ideal disciple because Mary, as the medievals portrayed her, was as if a single, pure pane of glass. Nothing about Our Lady pointed to Our Lady. In her enduring, personal, deep, desirous, on-fire relationship which she had with her son, which was unique, she became completely transformed and transparent, so that her last earthly words were, "Do whatever he tells you." And Our Lady became silent. So, I ask you, are you not simply willing to have your life rearranged, important enough in the encounter, but are you willing to have that rearrangement never end, but to be an enduring relationship with the Lord, doing spring cleaning spiritually 365 days of the year? If you and I cannot do that, or are not willing to do that, then we will not be effective leaders of communities that are credible places of encounter with the Lord. Again, let me be blunt. Our business is not to create programs and initiatives. Our business is not to build churches that are bigger from generation to generation. Our business is not solely all those things are wonderful, and they should be done. But our primary work, my friends, is to bring others and ourselves to heaven. Our vocation is to become saints. It's as simple as that. And everything else we leave behind. John Vianney knew it, and he's reminding us today of the same. So what I'm really saying is, leaders of communities that are credible need to be leaders who are committed to grow in sanctity, to become saints, here and now with Christ's grace. How do you do that? 1,000 ways. Allow me to highlight 2. First, practically speaking, it was brilliant that you broke up into groups of 2 and 3. Because the first thing I'd like to challenge you and I together is that we need to intentionally choose spiritual companions who will help us in our work of leadership. Leadership is never exercised alone. It is exercised in companionship. Now, if there is the possibility of spiritual direction, even better. To have a formal guide who gets to know you better than you know yourself, who can help you to discern the movement of the Spirit, who will guide you in your decision making and in this enduring relationship with the Lord. That's the ideal. And please God, we will one day arrive there. It will not be in my lifetime. And I'm not that old, okay? But spiritual companionship, yes, that we can do now. I speak about my mother often because my mother was my spiritual companion. She was my mother first, but she was my companion. What does that mean? I am not ashamed to tell you that of all the people who I've ever met, with whom I've shared my life, my mother was the one person I knew that no matter what I did, as horrific as that could be, as angry as she would become because I may have done something really stupid, my mother would never stop loving me. Never. I knew that. So she was my spiritual companion. So let me ask you, who is your spiritual companion? It may be your husband or wife. It may be your sister or brother. It may be someone you share ministry in your parish. But the truth is, we need to intentionally ask for the grace to seek the person with whom we can literally become transparent. Because this is all about holiness, sanctity, and heaven. The other, my friends, is as we gain these companions, we must rediscover the art of listening if we're going to be leaders. Allow me to tell you a story. A young man who was one of the delegates at the synod in Bridgeport, in the midst of this moment when the 400 some odd people are all talking about the young church and the problems with the youth and blah, 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 all this stuff. He is 20, stood up and said, "Excuse me, but you are not listening. We are not problems." We're not problems. Everybody's saying, really? We are not problems. Okay? You are not listening. You are hearing, but not listening. See, there's a difference. The delegates were hearing all of this data and trying to make sense of it, but they were not listening, because listening means more than the ear. It means the ear, the mind, the heart, the spirit. It's to be open to one another and allow in this encounter we're speaking for that encounter to change us, mold us, and with the power of the Spirit make us somewhat very subtly and quietly supple to what the Lord is asking. If we are going to be leaders in this enduring relationship, and we're going to develop this life of relationship with the Lord, listening to Him, a leader worth his or her salt will also learn to listen to one another. Step 1. Step 2, the journey through the Sinai. Moses, of course, was chosen to lead God's people to liberation. We know that, the crossing of the Red Sea. And they spent 40 years in the desert. We are living in a desert as well. That's not physical, but spiritual on so many levels. We could talk about that in question and answer time. But I looked it up. The Sinai Desert is 130 miles east to west, 240 miles north to south. You are looking at a man who is directionally challenged, but even I could find my way out of this desert in 40 years. Okay? Really? But they didn't, did they? Because the lost was not directional at all. God's people had lost their own enduring relationship with Yahweh. They had lost their vision, their sense of mission. And if you wanted any experience to highlight that, to consider the wonders they saw with manna in the desert, water from the rock, and as soon as Moses left, within a short amount of time, left them 40 days, they are worshiping a golden calf in revelry and dance. In the middle of the desert, still lost, you know it's more than the lack of Google Maps. That was the problem here. Why? Why? Because, my friends, it would be safe to say that the root of being lost was they had lost their sense of a true community and had become instead an assembly of a sea of individuals. I kind of, in my more comical moments, imagine like a room filled with the Three Stooges, each pointing a different direction. Nobody listening, hearing, empathizing, understanding what it is they're about. Last year I spoke about the very famous saying you have all heard, I am spiritual but not religious. That gave birth to this topic. And in the end, if you recall, I said spiritual is my search, religious is our search. And many, many people are saying, I will figure God out on my own. I don't need to do that. That is being lost in the Sinai Desert. That's where we're at. And in our world, which does not understand the difference between private and personal, that faith is personal, but it is never private. It's not just mine, but it's shared and relates myself to all of you. We are now finding ourselves in the desert, and you and I are the leaders. So what is it that we are meant to do? This may sound so simple, it may be comical. But I am deadly serious. We need to spend less time looking at each other and more time looking to Jesus. Let me tell you what that concretely means. If you and I wish to be a leader in this new communities that are credible, I'm going to ask you, my friends, to take on the spirit and skills of true collaboration. For this cannot be achieved without collaboration. But allow me to define collaboration as I understand it to be. It is not cooperation. We all get together, we make a plan, we all agree, we all hold hands, we do it, and we all congratulate ourselves. See, that business world does that. It's wonderful. Make lots of money. Okay. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Collaboration is far more than cooperation. Collaboration is keeping our eyes fixed on the one who is leading us, Jesus the Lord, and asking Him to help us to discern His holy will, not yours and not mine, His. And to respect the complementarity that exists in this room, each in our own states and vocations, without jealousy, without rivalry, without competition. To be able to put our hands to the plow and lead us forward where He wants us to go. Stop wasting time looking at each other as if we are the deciders of where the church is going, and keep our eyes fixed on the promised land. It's the promised land. And if we look that way, we will find our way out of the desert. So let me be more direct. If you wish to have a collaborative spirit, if you and I wish to be collaborative leaders, then everyone needs to be invited to put their hand to the plow. Everyone has a gift and talent to be offered. There is no one who is poor in our midst in the true sense. Everyone is invited to keep their eyes fixed on the Lord, not just ours, not just our eyes. And everyone is being called to share suffering and achievement together. And if you're saying, well, Bishop, that sounds very lofty, how do I do that? Then let me give you a more practical way. Instill in your life, the lives of your parishes, and your personal life and mine, a true spirit of service. Service as is meant to be lived in faith. Service that encounters human beings as true brothers and sisters, addresses their needs so that our eyes are fixed on them and to lift them up. I have to demonstrate something. Okay, my friends. There are two ways to understand mercy. Let me demonstrate one. Someone homeless in the subway, give them $1, mercy. Give somebody a helping hand, lift them up. World understands mercy this way. That is not Christian service. This is Christian service. Christian service, Pope Francis says, smell like the sheep. This is Christian service. Someone is there in need. I am not a have, and that person is not a have-not. We are both have-nots. Mercy is lived this way. You get on your knees, put your hands under the person, lift them to your heart, and lift them up. And when you are heart to heart, that is when you and I begin to smell like the sheep. Because in that act of service, it's not that I am giving a poor person something that I had, but that poor person is enriching my own spiritual poverty. And in this mutual eye to eye, who are we looking at? We are looking at Christ. If a leader is not willing to get on his or her knees and smell like the sheep, in that true spirit of collaboration, true spirit of service, then what we are looking for will not happen. I have a phrase I use, self-sacrificing leadership. And that's what we're talking about here. Self-sacrificing leadership. Or allow me to remind all of us that the cross is the catechism of leadership. Why? 3 things. Jesus hung on the cross, his arms extended, embracing the whole world. A leader is to embrace all before him and her in God's mercy. The cross was affixed so that you looked up, because you embrace them, not because you're loving them, but because God is loving them through you. This is all about getting them to the glory of heaven. And the cross is grounded in the earth. And as leaders, we are grounded in the truth, because lifting a person up is lifting them to the fullness of truth, he who is the way, the truth, and the life. Self-sacrificing leadership, this second piece, can be summarized as Bishop Barron says so beautifully. My life is not about me. My life is about you. Humility, essential, or this could not happen. But allow me to give you another image. A leader who lives this Mosaic spirituality does not lead, now I started props, I'm going to keep going, does not lead and people follow. The leader that I'm describing leads from the rear and pushes, cajoles in mercy and love and accompaniment and everything we've spoken about, tells people to say, you can do this too. We're all in this together, because discipleship is not a spectator sport. And discipleship is not sufficiently lived with 1 hour of worship and your envelope in the basket. It's more than that. The third, and this is the kicker. Moses did not go into the promised land. Remember? He did not. He glimpsed it, but did not enter. All right, let me state the obvious. For some of us who are older, and maybe some of us who are younger, this great transformation of the church that we're speaking about, this great renewal, my friends, is going to take God's time to accomplish, not mine, not yours. And this self-sacrificing leadership that I'm referring to demands one question to be answered. Are you willing to give in collaboration, in self-sacrifice, in an enduring relationship with the Lord, going to Calvary? Are you willing to do all that and lead God's people forward towards Jesus, the living promised land, and not see the full fruits of what you do? Are you willing to do that and not see much of the fruit of what you will do? And if you're sitting there saying, is he kidding? The answer is, no, I am not kidding. The answer is yes. I applaud you. If the answer is, I'm not sure, that's probably where most of us are. And that's why, as companions in faith, what I cannot do on my own, I can do if I can lean on your shoulder to do it. But that's what the Lord is asking. And I hope and pray that Moses can inspire us to say yes. In the end, my prayer each day is that we will see an army of Moseses who are risen in our church to do what we just said. The time is now. Let me end with a practical suggestion. Mary Kay had mentioned my 5 questions. I've been giving those questions a lot of thought since I offered them, because they apply to me as they apply to all of us. I have a suggestion in a very practical way to try to bring those questions together and everything we've talked about. Would you consider in your parish communities to reimagine yourselves, your parish communities, as schools, not of faith formation, not of catechesis, but schools of Christian discipleship? What does that mean? In the General Directory for Catechesis, there is a new version coming out. And in the old version, it speaks about the image of catechesis basically following the lines of the catechumenate. But if you extract from that, it has a very interesting insight. What it says is, there are some people who are struggling to have an encounter with the person of Jesus. There are some people who, once they have the encounter, it's like a little flame. And they're looking to have that flame become bigger and stronger and more strengthened, so that the winds of life do not blow it out. And then there are some where the fire is burning enough that they want to learn more about this Jesus and learn it through worship, catechesis, study. And then there are those that have that flame so much burning, who have come to know the Lord by encounter and by study and worship, that they are ready to go out into the world as missionary disciples, and they're going to go out there and they're going to bring the world to Christ, one person at a time. So this is my question. Could we dare to imagine parishes where every single one of those categories of people felt they belonged, had a place to go, could be nurtured and nourished, without judgment, always moving them towards the promised land, which is this enduring, living relationship with Jesus Christ? Let me give you some practical ideas before I end. This first group, all right, looking for the encounter, follow Benedict, Pope Benedict's idea of the courtyard of the Gentiles. Buy a van and go to the nearest mall and preach the gospel. Go give out ashes wherever you're going to find people who at the beginning will think it's a nice novelty, but you do not know, as you said so beautifully, how that encounter can change people's lives. Go to the coffee shops, to the bars, to wherever people are, and bring the gospel, not just in word, but in witness. Can a parish do that? We talk about this desire. That's the pre-catechumenate. How do you make that fire grow? Well, you know what, my friends? There's 1,000 ways. Beauty is one. Beauty moves the heart. Truth moves the heart. Right conduct moves the heart. Service moves the heart. What are the ways in your parish that the people who have the beginning of it, how can they be nurtured? And in catechesis, my friends, forgive me for saying this, but the model that we're going to only catechize in an academic structure is long waning. That is not to say that catechesis doesn't have a classroom component. It always will. But for children and young people, for 35 weeks, for an hour and some odd minutes each week, is only scratching the surface. If we are imagining this third piece of allowing that fire to burst open, then this is where your creativity and imagination and looking at the best practices around the country, that's what I'm going to invite you to do to build these communities. Look and see what fits and do it. I am going to give license in my diocese to blow up catechesis in the fall. We have a catechetical task force. There are 24 different models in that program, and if you want to come up with the 25th, go right ahead. The bottom line is, look, wonder, be courageous, daring, and remember catechesis involves mind, heart, spirit, and hands. All of it. And the last, the mystagogia piece, this going out into the world, could we imagine a church where young people and old people, hand in hand, serve in the world? It's not just for the young, but an intergenerational model that gives hope to the older, that the young are now responding, and for the younger to begin to respect the wisdom of their elders who have fought the valiant fight of faith for many, many years. Some ideas. But to see the parish as the place that's a school where everyone belongs, and the school is not a classroom, school makes life the classroom. I ask you to consider that as leaders looking for these credible communities of faith. I have one last point to make. I know I've offered a lot of questions, a lot of challenges, and I offer them to myself. But please do not mistake all of those challenges with the wonderment, is this going to work? Because I stand before you as a brother in faith and as a bishop to tell you I have never had more confidence and hope for the church than I do right now. We have gone through great purification, and the Lord has asked us to do that, and rightfully so. The Lord has thrown us into an age of great challenge, and rightfully so, because it reminds us and encourages us to remember what is important. But I have no doubt that the church has yet to see its better days. And for us who are the new Moseses in the world, I ask you to consider this. If we do not have the confidence to lead God's people towards the promised land, who will? But I know in our hearts of hearts, we do have that confidence. Because in the end, even if we fall flat on our face, there is one who will pick us up, dust us off, kiss us, and send us out again, and his name is Jesus. My friends, persevere with courage so that we will at least glimpse the great renewal that we are all praying for. Thank you all very, very much.